Today on First Century Foundations, we look at the ancient burial practices from the time of Jesus with Dr. Dan Bahat. Karen talks with Peter Tsukahara from Kehilat HaCarmel, and I look at some ossuaries at the Israel Museum, and it's all coming up right now. Hey everybody, I'm Joe Amaral.
And I'm Karen Amaral.
Welcome to another edition of First Century Foundations. And this season we're exploring different themes. We're looking at the culture of Jesus. And today we're going to address a question that some people don't understand when Jesus makes a certain statement in the New Testament and he says, "Let the dead bury the dead." What in the world does he mean by that?
Well, let's have a look at that scripture. It's found in Matthew 8.
Okay.
When Jesus saw the crowd around him, he gave orders to cross to the other side of the lake. Then a teacher of the law came to him and said, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go." Jesus replied, "Foxes have dens and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head." Another disciple said to him, "Lord, first let me go bury my father." But Jesus told him, "Follow me and let the dead bury their own dead."
Ouch, that's another one of those passages that if you don't understand the culture, you're saying, "Jesus, I don't understand. You said that you came to fulfill the law. You came to teach us the law. And the law says that you're supposed to honor your mother and father." And now he's saying, "Oh, don't worry about burying him, or don't go to the funeral, or don't do what you're supposed to do as the firstborn."
Seems like a contradiction.
Yeah, just kind of leave him alone. And you're saying, that sounds rude. It doesn't make any sense. Well, if we don't understand the culture, we don't get what he means. And to try to understand that more, we're going to join Dr. Dan Bahat and go visit some first century tombs to see if we can really get the meaning of what Jesus was saying.
And today I'm going to visit Kehilat HaCarmel and find out how they're making disciples in the land.
Awesome. It's going to be a great show. Stay with us, guys. If I'm going to look at ancient tombs, it's going to be with my good friend, the world-renowned archaeologist Dr. Dan Bahat. And today he's brought me to an impressive tomb right in Jerusalem.
Yes.
Danny, okay, I've seen lots of tombs with you before in the past,
Yes.
but this one is totally different. It's large, it's ornate. Why is it so different, do you think, from some of the smaller ones we've seen?
Well, first of all, we are in a large graveyard. All of Jerusalem, first century AD, is all in the northern part of Jerusalem. Today it's difficult to see because all the area is built over.
Right.
This one is exceptionally beautiful cave, and therefore already the scholars of the 19th century started to believe that this is where the Sanhedrin is buried.
Hang on a second, the Sanhedrin?
That's what they believe, because it's a big one, and they believe this is adequate for 70 people to be buried in it.
We need to let our viewers know, the Sanhedrin, they were the religious body of the time of the temple who made all the decisions for ritual life and daily religious life.
Yes.
And you'll read about them in the New Testament and the Gospels. So tradition, not for sure, tradition
for sure
says.
Not. I mean, not for sure not. You cannot prove it. You cannot prove it, of course. There are many tombs, many of them are beautiful. Far to be, we cannot go there because there are no roads going there, but all the valleys around here are covered with this. This is a large graveyard. We call it the Sanhedrin Garden because of the belief of the early scholars. It is a typical first century AD tombs. It has got kuchim, or corks as it is called in the modern time, which means those niches to which you put the ossuaries, and that's how we find it actually in many of these.
Okay, so Danny, tell me, you said this is a typical first century tomb. You may know what it is, but maybe some people don't. Well, what makes this a typical first century tomb, in your opinion?
Yes, all the tombs, and this will refer also to the tomb of Jesus, which I'll tell you why. Usually people speak about rolling stones and, when Jesus was buried, and usually the reconstruction is a real big rolling stone. But no, look, there is no place for rolling stone here. Stones here are square, they are pushed into the opening of the cave, not rolling stones. Rolling stones we have got only in the royal tombs, which are completely something else. In Hebrew, the word for a stone which covers a tomb is rolling stone, because of original use once as a real rolling stone. Now, we've got one good example. I'll tell you about it later. At any rate, this one is beautiful. it must have been as typical tombs at that time, which means you go from here to a little, I'll say a little room.
Okay.
Usually the floor will be lower. Why?
Why?
So that the undertaker can stand erect.
Okay.
Because all the kohims are very low, and he has got, you know, to maneuver and do things.
Okay.
So it has to be lower so that the undertaker can stand straight.
Okay, so in that main meeting room, is that where they had the places to lay out the bodies, or was that a separate place?
In some places, because remember that all the tombs in Jerusalem are family tombs.
Right.
Family burial tombs. Remember, the New Testament, Jesus was laid in the tomb of Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea. That
Right.
was their family tomb.
Right.
At any rate, the interesting thing is that the more you go, you see those niches, those kuchs as we call them. They can house 1 or 2 ossuaries, sometimes even 3, depends on the size. This one is especially a big cave, and not only big, but also very ornate. Think of it, what they had to do in order to make this cave, you see where the rock is, it went down the slope, and you can see on the floor, you can see some incisions to show you which stones were taken out in order to dig this enormous pit in which we are standing, and even put benches around for the mourners when they come to sit around. Yes, during the annual, whatever it is, the annual commemoration day or whatever it is. Then the front is, of course, beautifully made, very straight, very beautiful, smooth walls. You go inside, step, and you can see above us the beautiful ornament, which makes a kind of a pediment. And according to the Jewish laws, you're not allowed to have human images or faces or anything. It is usually flowers. Sometimes it will be a kind of, I would say, a kind of an amphora from which leaves, trails are coming out, leaves and things, very typical. The interesting thing that they copied even from the Greek style, because this is the very typical thing to the art of the 1st century, a kind of Hellenisticized Jewish kind of art. You see, when you go to a Greek temple, on both sides you've got animals or shells and things. Here you can see on 2 sides, you can see something like leaves sticking out. Very interestingly, it reminds us very much when you go, very famous in the world is Petra, when it has real, sometimes amphoras and things. Here they are much more modest in the way of the decoration they do. Otherwise, it's really very typical. You cannot be mistaken. When they come here and you show me this, I'll tell you immediately, typical Jewish art of the 1st century.
There used to be ossuaries, those limestone little bone boxes for collecting. Of course, they're not in there now. Do you know, is there a good location in Jerusalem where we could go and maybe try to actually see ossuaries?
Usually they're taken out. In those tombs, since they are known for centuries, they were robbed already in antiquity.
Right.
But when we have, because of the development work, when all the houses were built, we excavated many. They're mostly houses, either in the museum,
Which museum?
Beautiful, the Israel Museum. Which
so they have some there?
They have some there. Otherwise, our Antiquities Authority has got a whole storage, but the beautiful one is exposed to the public. What they show usually will be floral designs, rosettes, sometimes very important, imitation of the frontage of the temple, which is also beautiful, and also the typical style of stones cut in Herodian style. Also, sometimes you can see depiction on the ossuaries. So the decoration varies, really.
So there is a location. As Danny and I were walking back to the car, we came across exactly what I'd been hoping to see.
Oh, Joe, look at that. Here is something which I'd like to show you.
What, this?
Yes.
It looks like they do fires in there, barbecues.
Yes, because I told you the area is completely neglected. Down below here you've got a normal tomb, and next to it you've got this one. This is a typical, what we call arcosolium. This is a type of tombs which was also prevailing in the 1st century, not much, but usually the tomb of Jesus, when you see the reconstructions, is always in this shape.
Like this?
You've got to, you've got this dome or whatever, half dome, and down below you've got the resting place of the deceased, or sometimes ossuaries can be put inside. It's not popular. It's not popular. That's why I tend to put Jesus' tomb more like the Kohen style, which we can see.
Like we saw back there.
Like we saw there, and not our Cosolium
But
tomb.
still, this is a place where they would place ossuaries.
Ossuaries, yes.
Wow, very cool.
Usually it is inside the tomb. I'm surprised why it is outside. White is outside the burial cave.
Without protection.
Without protection, like that, yes. Probably it was a kind of, the family maybe decided it was full there, so I don't know.
Interesting, yeah. I've never seen that too.
It's a very crudely cut tomb. It's not one of the beautiful ones.
Okay, awesome. This was really cool. We were just talking about these places where they put the ossuaries, and as we were walking, Danny just showed us one that's really, really cool. And now we're going to go over to the Israel Museum to see an actual ossuary. I'm really excited to be able to see that. Danny, again, thank you so much for taking us. We like to have a great time. Coming up, Karen visits with Peter Tsukahara from Kehilat HaCarmel to learn how they're making disciples. And later, I catch up with Rabbi Ken Spiro at the Israel Museum to look at ossuaries.
For 2,000 years, man has been studying the life and words of Jesus. But in our modern culture, can we truly understand what he really meant? Now we can. Joe Amaral's book, Understanding Jesus, removes the veil of history and brings us greater understanding of the time and culture that Jesus and the authors of the Bible lived in. In Understanding Jesus, we study the feasts of the Lord as Jesus celebrated them and find valuable insight into God's prophetic timetable throughout history. Knowing more about this ancient culture will give you accurate insight into the teachings of Jesus and will take your faith to a whole new level. And this life-changing book can be yours for just $20. Call today and order your copy of Understanding Jesus by Joe Amaral, 1-877-628-2800, or visit us online at www.firstcenturyfoundations.com.
I'm here on Mount Carmel with Pastor Peter. And Peter, can you tell us how somebody like you got involved in Israel here?
Well, Karen, I'm a Japanese-American Israeli.
Wow.
I have a Japanese face and an American-sounding voice and an Israeli passport. My wife and I came to the Lord back in the 1970s, and the Lord called us here to Israel, and we came as immigrants in 1987. So now we're in our 26th year, and all here on Mount Carmel. It's been quite an adventure.
I'm sure. So what is it that you do in this place here?
Well, one of the founders of the congregation, myself and David Davis and our wives got together and we founded this congregation in 1991.
Wow.
And soon we were invited right here to this room when we were about 15 people. And now the ministry has grown into a network of different ministries.
Okay.
And my wife and I started and now run the Or HaCarmel Ministry Center. Or HaCarmel means Light of the Carmel.
Oh, okay.
And it's a center for the starting of new ministries and nurturing them and launching them out to impact Israel.
Wonderful. What would you say are some of the needs of the ministry?
Well, you know, we always need good people. You know, one of the things that we found over the years is that when we get the right people with the right calling and the right gifting and skills, then the ministry will grow and move forward. And over the years, we've been blessed with so many good people who've come alongside of us, both in a volunteer capacity, but also as immigrants to work and to develop the community. So our primary need is for people to come and to help. Secondly, you know, we have a need for funds to keep these facilities in working order, and the ability to be able to have these rooms and grounds where we can train and disciple the next generation of Israeli leaders.
And for our viewers, what would you say would be one of the key areas that they could lift you up in prayer?
Well, about 11 years ago, we started a school called the Mount Carmel School of Ministry. And it was meant to be an intensive immersion for Christians from other nations to come and to experience Israel through the eyes of the local believers. You know, the Israeli pilgrim tour industry is well practiced. I mean, they're a well-oiled machine. They bring in literally millions of Christians a year, take them through the country, and they never meet a local believer.
Oh, okay.
So they come and go with a little more than Kodak moments. But we started the School of Ministry here on Mount Carmel in order to counteract that and to really give foreign Christians who really want to understand what modern Israel is all about, and to make the connection between modern Israel and the Israel of the Bible that they've been reading about for so many years. So we focused this 12-day intensive school on that. And now we've been running it for 11 years. We must have 2,000 or 3,000 graduates in various countries.
Right.
And twice a year, in March and November, we take in students, participants. We design the school for pastors, but anyone with a solid biblical background and engaged in some kind of service for the kingdom of God would be welcome to apply. And we take them around 120 at a time.
Oh, wow.
And really give them an experience in Israel that is intended to change their lives and to change their orientation to the living God.
That's wonderful. Well, if you would like to get involved with this ministry, if you would like to learn more about them, visit our website or call our office. You can also sign up to receive our bi-monthly Israel Prayer Watch and learn more about these ministries here in the land. We'd love to hear from you.
To make a donation or learn more about this ministry and the Israel Prayer Watch, visit us online at www.firstcenturyfoundations.com or call 1-877-628-2800.
To find out more about ossuaries, I went to the Israel Museum, which has an amazing collection of these ancient bone boxes, and I met up with Rabbi Ken Spiro. So we just came out of a tomb where we were talking about burial practices, and we talked about ossuaries. Now, of course, there were none there because the tombs have been cleaned out. But now we're here at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, where we have an abundance of ossuaries. So, I mean, we've talked about ossuaries before, and we've done documentaries about them. But for a lot of people, this might be the first time that they're actually seeing ossuaries. Tell us a little bit about the practice of using them. Why go to all the work and the expense, of putting the bones in these boxes?
Sure. Well, first of all, ossuaries are part of that secondary burial process, which we know is not just a Second Temple period phenomenon. In the First Temple period, we had that. But unlike in the First Temple period, where the bodies would be laid on a shelf and then the bones would be collected and collectively put in a room below, the ossuary practice appears late Second Temple period using the soft limestone, which is the most common stone in the Jerusalem area. Some people actually speculate that because of all of Herod's building projects and his successors, there was like an excess of stone, and it led to this coffin industry. And we talk about ossuary, it's basically a form of what's called secondary burial. The word comes from the Greek word for bone eater. It sounds a little morbid, but it makes sense. Now again, unlike the First Temple period, you'd come back after a year, you'd take the bones and you'd stick it in one of these, it looks like a mini coffin, and it's made of limestone. You can see the engravings are, some of them are incredibly elaborate.
These rosette patterns are beautiful.
Again, you'll notice what you don't have on these are images of people or animals. You have nature. This is the prohibition against idolatry.
Yes.
You often have inscriptions of who's buried in there. But a lot of the scenes are just purely meant to be decorative. Sometimes images of even the temple or buildings. There's one particular ossuary at the end where the stones look very much like the stones of the...
Here, let's show them. I mean, it's absolutely...
Where the stones, if you're familiar with the Herodian building format of
very typical
the ashlars,
Herod.
the stones he uses of the raised center and the recessed frame.
That's right.
It really looks like you're looking at a mini version. This one, by the way, was produced in a factory and it was never used to bury anyone. It was like ready for sale and not used.
It looks like it came off the line last week.
It's in mint condition.
Beautiful shape.
This one is beautiful. It looks like a little mini building. And again, you notice, unlike in maybe a Greek or Roman building, you'd have little Greek and idols, or only have pictures of leaves and plants. But the size of the ossuary, it's specific. You notice some of them are more elaborate, but they're more or less the same size because they're bone repositories, which means they're the width of the widest bone in your body, which is your skull, and the longest bone in your body, which is your femur. And sometimes in these boxes, you'd actually find more than one skull and femur, so they could themselves be used for multiple burials.
Okay, so just because there's a name on the outside doesn't necessarily mean that's the person or the only person inside, because you could have used it for
chances are, if you found a name and one body in it, that would probably be the body. Multiple, was it more than one? Maybe had more than one name on it. But the names, by the way, you can see on some of these are actually in Aramaic, which is a Western Semitic language similar to Hebrew, which the Jews, along with the alphabet that they brought back, the Assyrian script that is used until today, they also brought back that language. And Aramaic was the lingua franca. It was the international language spoken even in the land of Israel at the time. Okay. And it sounds similar to Hebrew, but instead of, like you'll see on these ossuaries, it'll say instead of ben, which is son of, it'll say bar.
Right.
Bet resh, which is the Aramaic version, similar language.
Okay.
But the other thing you see here are, this is called a sarcophagus.
Yeah.
Or sarcophagi.
Right.
Which is also from the Greek word, and it means flesh eater.
Flesh eater. So we have bone eater?
Bone eater and flesh eater. It sounds kind of scary.
It's not like racing cars or something. I don't know, kind of cool.
The difference between these two, they're both made of limestone. This one you can see is significantly larger. There's several beautiful examples here.
Yeah.
This was not used for secondary burial. This, the body was placed in and left in.
So instead of just out, like in some of the other burial caves we saw.
Exactly. They would put these would also be in caves. Like if you go up to Beit Sha'arim in the north in the Galilee, there is a whole necropolis. There are multiple caves that are full of massive ossuaries. Interestingly enough, every one of them is, the lids are huge and heavy, so you can see they're smashed or dug into by grave robbers who were looking for stuff in them.
Sure.
But they actually, even though the sarcophagi, the ossuaries, the bone boxes were more prevalent in the late Second Temple period, sarcophagi were also used at the same time. And post-Second Temple period, this ossuary burial style more or less disappears, and you find many more of the sarcophagi, although not so much in the Jerusalem area, because we know that Jerusalem was destroyed and the center of the Jewish population of Israel moved up to the Galilee. So you find, like in Beit Sha'arim again, these kind of ossuaries, these kind of sarcophagi everywhere, often, by the way, reused in buildings. Even in Crusader castles, you find them being reused in secondary use.
Now, a question about this. If you're laying out the deceased person in a cave and just putting them out for the flesh to deteriorate, whether you put them out in the open or you put them in a sarcophagus like this, is there any religious implication to that, or is it a financial status? Because this is obviously very ornate and very expensive. Do you think it was kind of like today, you know, in a wealthy cemetery, you have these huge, massive monuments, and some have just a small little stone in the ground? Was there any status?
Ossuary versus sarcophagus?
Well, let's say nothing versus ossuary versus sarcophagus.
Sure, the nothing was the standard burial method. You could, 90% plus of the people who died had a simple burial where they put the body directly in the ground, which, by the way, is the burial practice that is done today in Israel. No coffin is used at all. The body's put directly in the ground.
Now, is it true that they're buried or wrapped in the talit?
You're right. You're buried in. Back then, it was a shroud. Today they have shrouds also. They use the same thing. And a talit, which is a prayer shawl, but without the tzitzit, without the strings on it.
Yeah, very, very beautiful. And so there definitely was some kind of a status associated.
For sure.
with
this. First of all, this is much more just to buy. Like if you see in burial today, you could spend a fortune on a coffin.
Yeah.
The simple versus the ornate. And again, it wasn't just the coffin; it was where it was placed. Wealthy families would have very elaborate tombs. Some of them you can see in the Kidron Valley. The tomb, for instance, is called Absalom's tomb.
Right.
Which, by the way, has nothing to do with Absalom.
No, it's just a traditional
But
name.
it's it's an extremely, if you've seen, even today, it's a beautiful structure.
Yeah.
But if you could see what it looked like when it was first constructed, this is a very wealthy family. To spend that amount of money on burial means they had the resources.
Okay, so we're looking at first century coffins.
Exactly.
Awesome, Rabbi. Appreciate your time. Thanks for coming
pleasure.
with us and hanging out with us.
Thanks for having me.
And I just want to let you guys know we're here in Jerusalem at the Israel Museum, and we want to thank them for giving us permission to come in here and film. And I want to invite you to come and see the museum for yourself. There are incredible displays here. We tour every year, as you know. Go to firstcenturyfoundations.com to find out when we're coming next. And if and when you do, I promise, guys, it'll change your life.
And like I always say when I'm tour guiding, if Israel's important to you, you should come when you're alive. And Joe's tour is probably a great way to see the country.
Well, thanks for the plug. I appreciate it.
What Would Jesus Read? The daily devotional book by Joe Amaral. Since the destruction of the First Temple nearly 3,000 years ago, the Jewish people have used a system of reading weekly portions of the Bible in an effort to preserve the Scriptures. This same system was in place during the time of Jesus. And now, with this daily devotional book by Joe Amaral, you can follow and practice the very same devotional system that Jesus used. This book is designed to help you read the Bible daily with a first century mind, bringing you greater insight into the mind of our Lord as you read what He read. Call the number on your screen now for your very own copy of What Would Jesus Read for just $25. 1-877-628-2800. or order online at www.firstcenturyfoundations.com. What Would Jesus Read by Joe Amaral. We're waiting to hear from you. Call today.
You know, we get to do a lot of really cool episodes and cool things, but for me, being able to go to the Israel Museum and see the ossuaries, I mean, they're like first century, coffins in a sense, but they're so cool because they're 2,000 years old, and just understanding that culture and the practices that they used to do was more than fun. It was so educational, and connecting with Dr. Dan Bahat there in the beginning of the program, and going to those tombs where traditionally they belong to the Sanhedrin. We don't know that for sure, like you said. But just being able to look inside and see where the ossuaries used to be. If you want to find out how we saw those ossuaries or how we saw that shot where the ossuaries were, go to the Backstage Pass area of the website, and it's really cool how we're able to get that shot. But for me, being able to learn that Jesus wasn't being rude. He wasn't telling that guy not to bury his father.
Yeah.
It was that practice of waiting for that 1 year period for the flesh to decompose and then going and burying your father. And that process of decomposition was not a Torah command, that was a man-made command. So when Jesus is saying that he's not being ignorant or he's not being disrespectful to the law, he's actually tackling the laws of man, and he's saying, no, follow the laws of God before you follow the laws of man. And it takes a lot to become a disciple of Jesus. And so it's exciting to know what was happening then, but even now you got a chance to see how disciples are being made in the land today.
It was awesome to meet with them today and find out what they're doing in the land, how they're training up believers, they're training up people who are going to affect their community, who are going to make a difference in their in other people's lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
So.
Yeah, I mean, it's awesome because it's always good to see what God has done in the past, and it's always exciting to learn and do adventures and all that.
But it's great to see what he's doing right now.
And that's what it's all about, because if we live in the past, we don't have a future. We have to see what he's doing today. And we're so thankful that we get to be a part of what it is that these ministries are doing here in the land. And so you can log on to our website, call the toll-free number, find out how you can make a difference praying and giving to the ministries here.
Yeah, and you can sign up for the Israel Prayer Watch. We produce it every 2 months. It lists all the praise reports of what God's doing in the land, and it also lists the prayer requests of what the immediate needs are of the ministries here in Israel.
Yeah, it's an awesome privilege to be able to help them, and our privilege is to be able to tell you, our viewer, about the Hebraic roots of the Christian faith. We believe that as you understand the Jewish foundations of Christianity, that's when you truly will begin to understand Jesus. So guys, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you here next time.
Shalom.
Oh, you punk.
Joe,
Are you getting that?
did you?
What have a bruise now?
You see? Strong hands.
Good, strong hands.
Here
Yalla,
we go.
yalla. And then thank you, Danny. Okay, and I'm gonna do this. Don't leave me hanging. You know what that means? Let's catch. Then we wrestle. Okay.